God didn't need my $5.
Right.
God needed my discipline. God needed my obedience.
What are 3 things they just need to do in order for that budget to work for them?
You got to start.
Okay.
Just start. I mean, it's, and what's funny is it's like riding the bike. You start it, and it's not as scary as once you get it. I've helped so many people with budgets. He doesn't need my money.
Yeah.
And when you get into the mindset that it's not your money,
Yes.
it makes it so much easier
Yes.
to be generous.
So the other side of the same coin, pun intended.
Yeah.
The simplicity practice was a lot like, do you need all the things that you have? I see people enslaved, working extra hours, wishing they could give, and they can't because of the 2 car payments they have in a home with 3 extra rooms that they don't need.
And my life, and especially the financial part, really began when I left a really bad marriage. I had $11.76 in my bank account.
Welcome to season 6 of our Formed by Jesus podcast. We are still talking about the practice of generosity, which is perfect timing when we're uploading this. We're now entering into the Thanksgiving/Christmas season. What a wonderful time to be generous. And so, man, if you haven't listened to the first 3 interviews already, make sure you do that either on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. I'm really excited today because today, man, the 4th is going to be an incredible interview. The one you're watching now is with Grace. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is an exciting topic for me.
Yes. I just remember we had you share your story briefly on stage, and we still have people talking about that, and that was like 3.5 months ago. So this was really by popular demand. People are saying, I'd love to know more about that story, and I know we're going to get into it. Kind of like that widow's mite moment that you had. In many ways, even though you weren't a widow at that time, but you know,
right.
A lot of similarities there. So, for those who don't know you, what's a good recap? Who is Grace?
Lord.
And then we'll go into the fuller story.
How much time do we have?
We have an hour. So
I was born in Northern Nevada, youngest of 4 kids. Mom was single parent, through a lot. So I grew up Lutheran. And going to church, understanding, about God, but not really ever a deep relationship with him or understanding the impact he could have on my life. And so I made a bunch of really, really bad decisions all on my own and went through my life, a couple of divorces. And that's really where my journey started. And my life, and especially the financial part, really began when I left a really bad marriage. I had $11.76 in my bank account.
Wow.
That was it. And the clothes on my back, and I had nowhere to go except for God. And he showed up in 100 ways. And
How old were you at that point?
We have to do the math. That was 2008. You do the math. I'm 58.
Okay, yeah.
Do the math.
No,
okay.
I think I'm really bad at math.
Yeah.
I preach. I don't
At 40,
count.
I was 42. There we go.
I think it's so encouraging because the interviews we've had so far, it's people figuring their life out at like 18 on how to do finances. And it's like, I want people to be encouraged if you're, even just in your 30s, it's not too late. In your 40s, your 50s, there's always a time to turn around your life with God, but also your life with finances.
Yeah. I started working for this company that was a startup, which I never recommend doing that when you're a single parent.
Especially in 2008, right?
Yeah.
Is this the same time period?
Yep,
Yeah.
2008.
Man, what a time.
And so it was really difficult I worked for this company that we did not know where a paycheck was coming in. We did not know any of that. And I started attending this little church in South Reno, and I was giving-ish sporadically, and God did some just amazing things that I didn't have credit. I did not have, I had $11, and the paychecks would come in and we'd get a check and there were 6 people, and how much do you need this week? How much do you need this week? And that's really what we got. So through the process, I was looking for a place to rent for myself and my son. And there was a little place that I found that would have worked. Again, it was a scary time because I did not know, dollar wise. I was budgeting. I did know I had $26.32 or whatever for gas that week. It was really down to that tight. So I get this phone call from this woman who was the landlord of this place. And she said, Grace, I want to rent you my house. And I said, well, that's great. But I knew the credit thing would come up. I knew that she would, need that first month's deposit or whatever it was. And she said, I rent on instinct and we will work out the deposit later. And I was thinking, that's amazing to me. So I hung up the phone. My boss was sitting across from me at my desk. And I said, well, I guess I just rented a house. And I said, well, interesting. I don't have any furniture. I don't have anything. And he says, well, what do you need? And I said, I have nothing. And he said, coincidentally, which when you're a believer, there's no coincidences.
Amen.
And so he said, because they were Canadian, and he said, one of our owners has decided not to come back to the United States. And he dropped his apartment key in my hands and said, it's all yours.
Wow.
And I went and I had dishes and couches and televisions and not plural televisions, but I had, a DVD player, which, that says a lot, sheets and blankets and towels and measuring cups. There was nothing that I needed.
Wow.
Nothing. And it was really fun because throughout my life, I really wanted this really nice set, a nice set of white dishes. I don't know. That was just my thing. I'm a girl. We go for dishes. And so in this, there was a set of white dishes. And I just think how amazing God is that when my boss was buying these dishes, God was whispering in his ear going, Grace wants the white ones. And so I moved into this place. I had full furnishings. I had everything. And so we were good, but it was still such a struggle. And I was giving sporadically, and that was it. And again, it was just a really tough time. But it wasn't until this next story that I did share this previously, but this one is where my life really changed. And I really learned to trust God. And I was at church, and the offering plate was going by in that awkward moment of how do I just let it go by? And I had $5 in my purse, and that was it. And I never had cash anyway. And I had $5, and I was like, what am I going to do with that? And I so clearly heard God say, if I can trust you with little, I can trust you with much.
Wow.
And I knew I wanted to be trustworthy. And that was the game changer for me. And the plate went by. I dropped my $5 in. The plate went by, and I'm like, okay, my rent was paid, my car payment. I had food in the cupboards, everything. What was that $5 going to do for me? And it's really interesting looking back. God didn't need my $5.
Right.
God needed my discipline. God needed my obedience. And the next day, I got a phone call from my school. I was going to school at the time. And they said, we made an error on your student loan that you'll have $800 in your account in the next 2 days. And it was in my account the next day. And it really was like, there's no coincidences. It's not luck. It's not any of that. It's purely God just saying, I love you. I'm going to take care of you. But he wanted all of me. And so from then on, I decided to start tithing.
So you went from sporadic to systematic.
Absolutely. And so it was tough. It wasn't an easy thing to go, okay, $5, now it's $20. And where it's $20.63 because it's net, God, you get net. And then I went to gross tithing, and then I just flat out just started really tithing and then I started rounding up. And what I learned is that God shows up every time.
Yeah.
And you can't outgive God. And during that time, I wasn't dating anybody because I just thought, oh, this is just a hot mess. And I'm a hot mess. And I needed to get my finances in order and all of that. And I really wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right. And so I started giving, and then the things would just happen financially. And so that the next thing, so the company ended up folding, big surprise, right? And so 2010 comes around and I'm looking for a job. And in 2010, you had to have a college degree to answer phones, to be a receptionist, to do whatever. And I had done my office management for 25 years. And I thought, oh, I know how to answer phones. And they said, we're requiring a degree. That's just because we can. So I thought, all right, what am I going to do? So I was really praying about it. And, in between, there was 3 weeks where in between the company that folded and then this other job opportunity, and I had applied for hundreds of places. And I actually got hired by this other company, totally different industry than I had ever been in before. But at this point, I was fully tithing. I wasn't giving above and beyond the tithe, but I was definitely tithing. And I got offered this job. Again, no one was working then. And it was just a really tough place for everybody.
I remember in 2010 for us, sorry to cut you off.
No.
I'm going to keep doing that every once in a while.
Yeah.
In 2010, we sold my truck. So I was about to go to college. And so that shows you how young I am. But about to go to college, and my dad was like, we have to sell your truck for us to eat this summer. Like, that was just 2010, that's the memory I have. And that's why I was like, Lord, I will do anything. Because I knew by then I was going into ministry. I was like, Lord, I will do anything but plant a church. Because just the instability of a portable church and all of that. And here we are. So I love how the Lord works. The one thing you say you'll never do, the Lord's like, no, you're going to be doing that. But anyways, it's a great game of trust. What I was doing was trying to hedge my bets and make sure I had a safer life. But okay, so 2010, back to you.
Yeah. So I started working for this company, and it was an insurance, which, nobody ever sets out and goes, I want to work in insurance. Mm-hmm. But it was a game changer, and it was just amazing how I applied. They interviewed me on my birthday, and I got the job that day. And it was amazing because it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I thought where I wanted to be, like you were just saying. Yeah. I had totally different ideas about where I was going. I was in school. I was working on my business degree. I knew where I wanted to go, but that's not what God does, right? God has his own plan, and it's just so much fun just to allow God to be God and get out of the way.
Yeah, what a good perspective.
Yeah, and so I got this job, and it was I'm not with that company anymore, but it's okay. It got me into a totally different industry that I had never thought of, and financially, yeah, it was a good move. But God also knows that I'm going to tithe that bigger salary. And when you're tithing and when you're giving, it isn't just he's gonna tit for tat. You get you get $1 for every $2 you put in, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work like that. And it is that God has absolutely every step of the way. There has been a need. He has said, okay, I'm here. So then I meet Mike.
Well, let me.
Oh, go ahead.
Quick.
No.
No, because I think you're bringing up such a great point, and we have time. As long as you have time, I'd love to slow down your story, because this is amazing. So, because you're saying it's not, hey, you give the Lord one, you'll get two. I so agree with that, and I know a lot of our people are struggling with that, because there's this thing out there called prosperity gospel, where it's like, hey, if you tithe to our ministry, it'll. You give us 10, you're going to get 100 back. And there's just that's not a good promise. And that's not about a relationship with God. It's a transaction. But I think one thing we did talk about in the generosity practice that I think is worth recounting again, like think about Barnabas. The first thing we see in Barnabas is an amazing person in the book of Acts. The first thing we see him do is sell his field and lay it all at the apostles' feet. Then years later, we see him have spiritual authority. And he helped start the first Gentile church. And he's the one who goes, where's that Saul guy again? Raises him up to become, the top 3 most influential person of all time. So Barnabas is an incredible person. So I think for Barnabas is a great example. sometimes you get more wealthy because God can trust you with money. Other times God can trust you with even more, like spiritual authority, like doing incredible things. So like my story so far, I'm so grateful tithing was put into my just regular everyday practice, because I can't, in all my 20s, I can never say, oh, the Lord gave us more money. It was always, we were squeaking by. But just the opportunities I've had to speak into people's life, it's like I think there's still a direct correlation of saying, God, I'm going to trust you with my finances. And the Lord says, okay, I'm going to trust you with more people to shepherd. Right? So it's not just a one-to-one financial blessing. There's so many different ways the Lord blesses us. As Jesus says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So,
well, and I don't know, at some point where we are shamed with money, where we stop, where it's a bad thing to talk about it. And I know in my own world, I had pride of, I was in a hot mess financially, and
it can be embarrassing.
Yeah, 100%. But then once you start, and I just can't even say how the things changed and relationships changed and how I view things changed. And it was just about me. Again, he doesn't need my money.
Yeah.
And when you get into the mindset that it's not your money,
Yes.
makes it so much easier
Yes.
to be generous, to make sure. And I'm humbled to be here for the generosity thing, because it's like, I'm just doing what God says.
Yeah.
And we are just living our life to go, God, what do you want from us? What do you need? Actually, the weekend Mike got married. Okay, spoiler alert, Mike and I get married. The weekend we got married, we went to our pastor and we said, what's next? What's for us next? Because we wanted to be so intentional with every piece of it. And money, funny enough, is what bonded Mike and I. And
that's amazing.
That was where we started our friendship. That okay, here's a really
well, it's the number one reason people divorce.
Yeah.
Money.
Yeah.
So, and it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why it can be a strong marriage.
Yeah. And so there was this guy, Mike, at my church that my son had a truck that was in terrible condition, and Mike was the resident mechanic.
Yep.
And which, he is that everywhere for everybody.
Yep.
And
you're not talking about a different Mike then. I know the Mike you're talking about.
Same guy. And so our pastor at the time had recommended Mike come over and take a look at it. And Mike did not want to take a look at one beater truck. And so convinced him, and he would come over on weekends and really start just, tinkering with it, see if he can figure it out. Because his previous life, he did work on automobiles. And we would really talk about money that in a different way than, because he had just started tithing too, and I'll let him tell his story, but he had just started tithing, and we would compare notes and kind of laugh about what a mess we both were in. And really for 6 months, that's what we did. And, I always joke with him today that if he had ever fixed Brett's truck, I would have poured sugar in the gas tank or something
funny.
to keep him coming around. And it was just amazing. And that's the foundation we built our relationship on. Jesus and money was, it makes sure that we were both on the same page before we intentionally dated. Before any of that, we knew that we were going to be equally yoked in that. And so that's where our progression in our relationship really started. And going further into, we had been dating about 4 years before we actually made the decision to, get to the next step of getting married. And neither one of us were going to have a joint account. That just wasn't going to be what we were going to do, because we had both been burned so bad by relationships and money in the past. And it was just never going to happen. And we both knew that. It was kind of an unspoken thing. You have your money, I have mine. We'll pool it together. We'll split mortgage. We'll do, all of that. And I don't remember what exactly, but it was a few months before we got married. And I think it was Mike who brought it up. And he had said, let's talk about this. And maybe it was Dave Ramsey. It was something where we had heard a hint about, are you combining your finances? And we're like, no, we're not going to do that. And then we realized we weren't all in, that there was a trust issue and it was really neat to have these really honest conversations about what that next step looks like for us. And we are going to combine our finances, and we're going to trust each other with that. And we're going to talk about it. And so we made that decision. And it's amazing to me how many people we know that don't combine. And everybody has their own situation, their own whatever. But for us, when you dive deep and you go, what's the reason behind this? Is there more to it? Is there, and for us, it was trust.
Yeah.
And so
I think all of money is trust, right?
Right.
Like, have you heard of that book, Psychology of Money?
Mm-mm.
It's like it's kind of new. It's like a bestseller, but like the profound statement he makes is like money is just psychological. Like it's all about a game of trust and understanding. And even the stock market is a game of trust.
Yeah.
And these companies and everything's held up by that. But I think that's why Jesus talks about money so much, because he's after our heart and he's after our trust. And we're tapping into the themes. I love it. You've already been mentioning all 4 themes. So from the generosity practice, we're saying we're disciples, not donors. So this is we're disciples of Jesus issue. We are abundance mentality, not scarcity. So I can just even sense by the way you talk about money, you don't have a scarcity mentality. It's like when you speak, I feel like there's just such a rest, like a posture of like joy and just also like release, which is just a wonderful thing to notice. And then stewards, not owners. So you even were just mentioning like when you realize it's not yours, it's just a totally different ball game. And then of course we said tithing, not tipping. And I love how your story is like sporadic. Like you can maybe even say you're tipping for a while and then life really began to change when it was tithing. But yeah, it was so interesting how that's such a great way to see how much you trust your spouse, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, so that joint account. So even I imagine when you guys when you finally joined it, that was like, you knew it was the right thing, but it's still a bit scary, right?
Absolutely. And so I was always the budgeter. I like Excel. That was me. And then to sit down and have a conversation about money, and there's no emotion in it. It's just a thing.
That's very good.
And there's nothing that you go, oh, is he going to want to do whatever? And we don't, and I hear where couples have these conversations, when we hit this X amount, we have to talk about that. We don't even do that because we both are so on the same page because we talk about money all the time.
Yeah.
And the scarcity thing, I don't care. I mean, I really, that sounds...
Did you grow up with money or were you poor? Like,
my mom was terrible with money, but,
okay.
We were probably just a middle-class family.
Right on.
And so I just trust God in it. And Mike's talking about retiring one day, and he'll ask, okay, we're still good. And I'm like, God's got us. I mean, why are we going to worry and I always refer to tear ducts. When the God of the universe created tear ducts to keep our eyes moist so that we can see, I'm going to worry about how my utility bill is going to be paid when he gave us a tear duct, when that little pinpoint, and so.
And this, of course, and this is in the context, you work hard, you're not lazy. Like,
right.
Some people, it's like, well, you need to worry, like you need to do something. But if you've done it all, you've done what you're called to do, the Lord's going to take care of us.
I have to put my shoes on every day.
Yeah.
And I do what
and you budget. Like there's things that you do, but it's all in a posture of rest and surrender.
Yeah. And we budget. We're budgeted out usually 6 months or a year.
Wow.
And we go through our budget, and you sleep well when you don't have debt, but you sleep well knowing that you are giving. God is faithful. And there's things, so we tithe, but then we also give. And so we have our favorite charities that we like to give to. We give to the building fund now. Mm-hmm. We, anything above and beyond, we give. We love doing that. And it's really fun that something will come our way and we're like, hey, should we give to that? We'll pray about it. And then, and we do, to bless somebody else. And then we get this other blessing and we go, okay, that wasn't the point. Thanks, God. But, we really were good. And it's just fun to see how God shows up every time, and he has never not shown up ever once. And
do you enjoy secret giving? Have you?
Yep. Absolutely.
Can you give even like, obviously you can't share because then it's no longer a secret.
Right.
But like, what is some of your philosophy behind that? Is there like examples where you're able to do secret giving? I was just talking to Brett about this on the last podcast as well. And I know both Brett and you, I've been a middleman sometimes for your secret giving, and I won't give that out. But what's your what are your thoughts on secret giving?
And it's funny because sometimes that something will just pop in that we will get information, and I'm being totally vague. We'll get information that normally I would never get that in. Okay, full disclosure, I don't TikTok, I don't Insta, I don't any of that. And there was a time that something came across, again, random, and I was like, we need to do something. We need to do, and I get so excited, and that's where the Spirit just gets you. And He's like, you need to give, you need to, write that, and it's fun.
There was one time where you literally said a number, like, hey, we're just thinking of this. And I was like, that's literally what they needed. So cool. Yeah. And I told Mike, and because it's funny, because when Mike and I will do that, and I will say, I have a number. What's your number? And Mike will tell me, and we will have the same number that we want to give. And so I think Mike told me you guys always pick the higher one too.
Yeah.
Like when if there's ever a time where it's the wrong, one of them's different. That's funny.
And then he'll go, okay, yeah, we'll do that. But that one time that you're talking about in particular, I was like, hey, here's the number. And I said, did you get that? Did you, and I'm all excited because it's just fun to give, because it's not my money. And there has to be said something too, that there's a great responsibility too, when you have, when you are in a position to be able to tithe and give, that there's a responsibility to be a good steward of that money too, that there's things we could be doing that we could really make sure that, okay, here's a scenario. Our financial guy, when we go and meet with him for our 401k or whatever, and we'll meet with him, and he kind of slaps our hand every year about how much we give. And he says, and then, he puts on his non-Bible hat and says, well, only 10%, is all you should be doing. And we're like, and then Mike shut him down. He said, this is non-negotiable. This is what we do. You'll have to get over it. And
nice.
And it's funny because when you look at those, and nobody even talks about how cool the tax part is when you give too, that you get the other end, not paying as much in taxes too. So that's a really cool piece of it. Yeah, it's good, but that's not the motivation at all.
Right.
But it's an added benefit. But our finance guy, now he knows to not even say anything, because he knows that no matter what, we are still going to. These are falling off. Sorry.
No worries.
Not used to this.
Yep.
So he is, now he doesn't even say anything to us, because he knows that's just what we do. And the joy that you have of just giving, of just being able to help other people, to bless, man, I want us to have a building. And with that comes a lot of prayer too. And that we are doing the right things, that we are not only just being a steward of God's money, but that we are doing the right thing by Passion Creek too. Yeah. A building, it just accelerates and amplifies what you're doing. So if our church is healthy, it's a very healthy thing. If there's any hidden not healthy things, it exposes that. But I just even remember when people talk to us about, at our church about our building and how can this be possible. I just remember when I graduated from college, I came back and I went to my father's church, Heart Cry, and they were at about 120 people, and I was just joined on staff with them, and within a year we got to 250, and then the next year we're at 400, and then the next year we had land, and it all happened so fast. And it's just so cool. Even like this last Sunday, I looked at our attendance, and I was like, what were we at a year ago today? And we're literally double from where we were last year to this year, and our finance, everything is. And I'm just like, I've been in this season before, and even if, when the Lord blesses us with the building, it'll always be such a surprise. But it's also like I wouldn't be surprised, because that's just what God does. Yeah. That's just how He works. So I love that I've been on that. I was like, I've seen this playbook before. But yeah. So was there a specific teaching when you decided, like, hey, okay, I'm going to become a systematic giver? Was it from a sermon? Was it from something you read? Or was it just like the Spirit of God saying, hey, you need to start doing this? the Spirit of God. And, it was, we were going to a Baptist church in Reno, and, the pastor would talk about it, but it always seemed scary to give up anything because, okay, God, are you not listening? I am a single mom. I have $40 in the bank or whatever it was. Are you not hearing? I can't give. And that's where it was just, and what's fun is that I have gone deeper with my relationship with God too, because I know that now he's in charge. And so when I look at back then, it was just the Holy Spirit nudging, like that first, if I can trust you with little, I can trust you with much. He knew the next steps. He knew once I got bitten by the Holy Spirit bug and I'm going to keep moving, that God does that. And you're right. I have to put my shoes on every day. I have to do the work. I have to budget. I have to make sure that I'm responsible with my money. And it doesn't mean like these jobs that I have, it isn't just you open your mail and there's an offer here from an employer. We heard about you on the street.
Right.
It's a lot of work, and it's all in God's time. That was 2008, 2010, so 14, 16 years ago. Holy cow, a lot's happened in that time, and it's in God's timing. Looking back and knowing where I am today, I would never have imagined that God would just have carried me through all that.
Have you ever been tempted to not tithe?
Yep.
Since that moment?
No, yeah, for sure. In the very beginning, and there would be times where I would, and it's funny because today that check just gets written. It's the first check we write every month.
So first fruits.
Yeah, and we are still check writers. I know nobody writes check. We write checks. But yeah, and especially when you are looking at your budget and you see that there is no room anywhere, and somehow it all works out.
Yep.
And I've heard I can't tithe because I have a car payment, because I have whatever. It's like, that's the time you should be tithing. That's the time you should show God how much you trust him.
Yep.
And because when I really started, because I, being a Christian my whole life, but really being a Christian in those early days where I was going, God, I'm just going to trust you, then that's where I would look at it and go, I'm just not turning back on this now. I am going full force. And somehow the bills get paid off.
Yep.
Somehow things make a change, but you also have to make different decisions too.
Yes. And I do want to get into budgeting with you a little bit because we just shoot ourselves in the foot often. And I haven't shared my story, and this isn't my place, but we have been there several times throughout. I just always think of my life since planning a church. It's hard to remember anything before 9 years ago, but there's several. We've always done first fruit giving, right? We call payday giving day. And there's been times where I was like, we have $3 in our account, but I had already given. So like but I never, by the grace of God, I never thought, man, if we didn't give, we'd be okay. I just knew. It's like, no, like if we didn't give, we'd probably be negative. Like that's,
right.
Like that's just how things work. And it's just an exercise of trust, and God is good. He's always there. Sometimes, and I think it's so helpful, sometimes we're provided not through some miraculous check. It's just that like people from church invite us over for dinner. It's like, oh, praise the Lord, we don't have to pay for dinner tonight. Like we're going to make it. And it's just so cool to see the church have each other's back. And that can be abused. And so that's why we have checks and balances and systems to make sure we're not just throwing around money anywhere. But some people from our church, no, I don't think he mentioned it on the podcast, but one guy mentioned to me one time, he goes, what's great about a church family is we know ultimately if everything really just gets bad, we have our brothers and sisters that will just help us. They're going to take care of us. Yeah. Now, these are people who never take advantage of that, but they do know, right? Yeah, like we need to remember we are a family. We're a community. And the sad part is the people who usually tap into that, they're not a part of the community. They find and say, hey, give me, no. But if you're in our community, you're us. Of course we have your back, and that's just another thing that I think, what a beautiful reason to be a part of a local church among the millions of others.
Right.
Let's talk about budgeting.
Oh, fun.
So like, do you use an app or do you just use Excel?
It was an app, I came up with Excel years ago. I mean, when I first started this whole thing with my $11, I just said, all right, it's super easy. On the left is what's coming in.
Nice.
On the left or the right is what's going out. And because it's Excel, then I would have whatever was left over put into the next month, and then it transfers over.
So every person has said that. Every person we've interviewed, they have so many cool. Actually, no. Yeah. You need a budget. YNAB. That's what Spencer uses. But like, it sounds. Yeah. I mean, everybody just seems to like Excel. I'm the every dollar app guy. Like, I need like a cool app that helps me with all of it. But yeah. So what's your rhythm? Is this once a week? Once a month? Every day? How often are you?
Oh, at least once a week, at least. And so Mike and I are on different pay days, and so we make sure we do that. And again, we don't have debt, so it's real easy just to look at it and go, okay, what do we have this week? What's coming in? What's going out?
Do you count when you say no debt? Are you including a home?
Yeah. So our home is the only debt we have. So I guess not. That's 100%. Yeah.
I would say that's debt free as well. I'm just
right. Yeah. And and things. And so let's go back to just how fun God is. And that's when we decided to move to Arizona. And that's a fun story that we were living in Northern Nevada, and my company bought an agency here in Arizona. And I was flying here every other week for about a year to get it up and running. And one of the weeks I was like, I really like it here. And Mike says, you really light up when you talk about Arizona. And so convinced him to come here, and we came here and loved it and really prayed about it. And it was like, okay, it's time to move. And so we ended up buying our house like 15 minutes before everything exploded. And we got it's just,
oh, wow.
So here's the fun part about our house is that we saw this, we came in June, and we saw this house that we're living in right now. And we said, all right, this is the price range. We're good. We're golden. Let's go ahead and put our house in Reno on the market. And so we put our house on the market. And by the time we came back here in August to buy a house, there was nothing. There was nothing. And the prices all doubled. And we're like, oh, man, we're going to be homeless. What are we going to do?
I remember that.
Yeah. And so our house in Reno sold in like 24 hours. So we had to buy a house. And so we saw our house that we're in now in June. And then come August, there was nothing. And so we kept upping our budget and upping. And then our realtor, who actually is a realtor for Heart Cry, and he says, you remember that house that you saw in June? He said, it's back on the market. We said, really? He said, it's fallen in and out of escrow twice since June, and the price was still the same. So we're going, really? That's stuff you can't make up. And so we immediately bought the house, and that was it. And, that was just, you couldn't convince us today that God didn't hold that house for us.
What a reminder that he's a giver of good gifts.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that? Sometimes I feel guilty when things just work out, and it's just like, thank you, Lord. And it's just a good reminder. He's such a good God, and he loves to give us good gifts. I was just telling my wife this last night, because so much of our church planting journey has just been hard. It's longer than I thought as far as the goals we would accomplish. And then lately we've just had a lot of wins, and it's like, I get a little nervous. It's like, oh, this has just been fun. This has been great. And then it's like, no, that's okay. Like, this is just a good God giving good gifts. And the best way we can respond is not through guilt, but with gratitude.
Yeah. And see, and then that's where you just go to, God is a loving God. So here's my story that happened today, which is just really fun.
Oh, fun.
I'm Mike and I are making beef jerky, but
and you didn't bring any?
Well, it's still dehydrating.
Oh, okay.
But we will. And so you need a lot of sea salt when you're doing that, right?
Sure.
And so I knew I had plenty. I have a Costco membership, right? So I knew I had plenty. And I go into the cupboard, and there's just this much. And we had a whole bunch to make, and it was not enough. And I knew it wasn't enough. And I'm going, God, do I run to the store? Do I whatever? And so I said, you know what? He did it with loaves and fishes. And I said, God, this is the loaves and fishes. And wouldn't you know, I had exactly as much as I needed.
Amazing.
And that's where I just think, when you trust God with everything,
Yes.
you trust God with everything.
Right.
And it's not, and even the sea salt. So he's cooking with me, and he knows that every little, and that was it. And where I was kind of so, and that's no different than our finances, right? You look at your budget and you're panicked, but that sea salt is there. And then to the end of it, you have everything you need. And at the end of the day, you have everything. And you're right. It was people showing up with food. It's so many different things that happen that you don't realize that God is still in the midst of everything, and he's with you and he's walking with you. He just wants you to trust him and trust him with your money. And so here's the challenge. When anybody is in a bad place financially and they can't afford to tithe, that's the time that you should be tithing.
Wow.
I mean, that's that.
Your story attests to that. That's not just some fake saying. Yeah, you live that.
Yeah, and when I was going through my early stages, and I'd say, okay, God, I trust you with this and this, but not this or this, not dating, not money, not any of that. And so I was only giving God 25% of me or 50% of me, and he wanted all of me. And once I surrendered that, the rest was easy. And then I met Mike, and we are on this really fun journey together, and the peace that you have every night, that you go, oh, okay, it's all under control, and God is in control, So it just makes it easy.
Yeah, I heard an illustration. It's actually kind of I'm blanking on where it's in Ephesians, where essentially Paul is making an argument like, open up your hearts to the love of God. And I just remember a preacher talking about that, and he talked about essentially, imagine your heart is like a home with many rooms, and the kind of trust that God is calling us to is the trust where Jesus is, you invite him in and he can go to any room. Most of us, we make the living room super nice.
Right.
We clean up that part and say, look, God, I'm presentable here, but do not go to the closet. Don't go to that other bedroom. It's a mess. But that trust of like, yeah, go to any room. Go ahead. This is all yours. And isn't it funny? We fight that. We're like, that'd be, and then the moment we give that over, it's like, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? This is what a joy. There's so much more abundance on the other side. Trust is what a beautiful posture to be in, rather than, because the opposite of trust is fear and anxiety, and it's just a terrible life to live.
Well, and that's where the enemy really tries to get in there and remind you of all the things that you didn't do right, of all the things, and then you just know that we serve a great God and a loving God who makes sure you have sea salt, that makes sure that your cupboards have enough what you need, and not even, and sometimes God even gives you some of your wants, and that's where you go, really, that was kind of cool that nothing that you expected or anticipated, but God still shows up every day, and he is right here. And I used to put God on a shelf and go, I'll get to you when I have time, when I'm through my list of things that I want to get done. But today, no. Today he is right here, and things, and I think that the tithing is the trusting, and I know that God is in control. And even when some things are hard, like at work or relationships, I know God is in charge of it all, and not me. And so it extends far beyond what's in your bank account.
Right. So true.
Yep.
So true.
Yep.
Okay, so I know you're a budgeting wizard.
I
Okay.
love budgets.
So
Bring it.
what a special skill. what a gift from God. When at Viking Feast you were like, what'd you say about organization?
Organization is a hobby.
Yeah, I'm like, organization. I call it a lot of things. I don't call it hobby.
I know.
Praise the Lord for people like you. What are 3 tips for budgeting? So like a person who is scared to do it, what are 3 things they just need to do in order for that budget to work for them?
Oh man. You got to start.
Okay.
Just start. I mean, it's, and what's funny is it's like riding the bike. You start it, and it's not as scary as once you get it. I've helped so many people with budgets and just to help them to find out what's coming in and what's going out, and it's not as terrifying. So
Don't even start aspiration, right? Just say what is, and then we can go
yeah,
from there.
yeah. And then how do you tackle it? And Mike and I did the Ramsey thing for a while.
Okay.
We
Cash only?
Yep. And so we made sure that but I think more than anything, you have to be realistic.
Okay.
You have to put your numbers down on paper, and everybody's numbers are different. And what does that look like? And are you accounting for the what ifs, the emergency fund? All of that are super important and I think once you get to that where you have just a little bit saved up, that eases your mind a little bit more than the what if scenario that can always come about. So and then tithe and trust God and pray over it, and
That's good.
and find somebody to be accountable to, because I hear, and again, we're not shy about talking about money because it's just we've had such a journey that it's fun to talk about, but so many people will say, I am so broke, and do you like my new sweater? Do you like my? I mean, it takes discipline to not, because we're in such a world of instant gratification.
Yes.
And I need this, and this is going to make me happy, and it's funny because the more that you earn doesn't necessarily, Mike and I were talking the other day about how we don't spend and how we don't, occasionally, Amazon knows our house, but there's so many things that we just do not buy that we could buy.
Yeah.
And so I think being honest with yourself about where you are financially, it's not going away. And hit those things head on. If you got to call creditors, it's hard, and then find an accountability person and maybe walk alongside them and talk about it. That's, like I said, that's where Mike and I started. It's
really freeing when you have somebody else.
Yeah. And, we even had something come up that we had an air conditioner go out, and those aren't cheap if you didn't know that. And it's funny, as much as we've gone through it, Mike and I found so many different ways to not pay for that air conditioner that, well, what if we put it on this card and then we pay it off next month and then we get the points and then we, and it was the silliest 10-minute conversation that we had. And then we kind of laughed at it because we bought the air conditioner and we didn't do any of that. And we just bought it. But those are things, and we just look at it and go, that's amazing that we were able to write a check for an air conditioner.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't write a check for groceries 14 years ago. And that's humbling to me that we have come to that. And being a Jesus girl is not instant anything. It's a hard road, but man, it's so rewarding. So, and just put it on paper, and it's not as scary. And
were you guys here for the simplicity practice?
No, we
That's
had
what
just started
right after.
Yeah.
Because that's like a good count, like the what is the other side of the same coin, pun intended.
Yeah.
The simplicity practice was a lot like, do you need all the things that you have? It actually really got a lot of people upset. Like, I had some pretty angry people, and I'm like, look, there's a legalistic religious version of that, and I hope you didn't hear my heart. Like, I'm not going out to the parking lot. What vehicles are people driving?
Right.
There's a wrong spirit to that. But also, I see people enslaved, working extra hours, wishing they could give, and they can't because of the 2 car payments they have in a home with 3 extra rooms that they don't need. It's just like so much per month that they're just slaving away for, when you don't need that,
And that's a really good point when you're talking about money. When we could have qualified for a bigger house. We could have qualified for, so I'm wrapping presents today, right? And I was telling Mike, in that big house that we talk about that stuff, but it'll never happen. I want a room where I can wrap just gifts. It's
nice.
just a wrapping room, But we never wanted to be cash poor with a house that was bigger than we needed. Our house is a small house. It's good for just the 2 of us. We're good. People come visit. We're golden. So that's the mindset, that I don't have to have the newest car. I don't have to have the best whatever. Would it be cool? Yeah, sure. But it wouldn't feel as good to sleep well at night knowing that
Yeah.
we're content. And contentment may be our word, that you go, can you be content with what you have?
And that was our tagline, the way of contentment in a world of consumption.
There you go.
We just consume. We think more and more is better. And man, is that a lie from the pit of hell?
Right.
You know,
Right.
I just can't, like, this is the scary thought. How many church buildings haven't been built because so many people wanted that extra thing in their own personal life, you know? Like, how many car payments have kept people from feeding the poor and, you know? And again, there is a very negative, if you don't know my heart, this can be like, this pastor, you know, doesn't want anybody to have fun, whatever. But really, it's like, man, I just want you to live in freedom. I want you to live in joy. And man, and I just remember there was a Facebook post somebody posted online anonymously in like this like Queen Creek group. And they were saying like, how can anybody live? They said, we make $200,000 a year and we're living paycheck to paycheck. And I'm like, well, what are you, you know?
Yeah.
But they think they're just the victim, and man, we need to make way more. Yeah. And it's like, you keep raising your standard of living. Right. It's just always going to be this way. Yep. And so like, what a good reminder. Sometimes the Lord doesn't give us more because we would just add to our problems. The proverb says inheritance gained prematurely leads to destruction. Sometimes God, like, you know, faithful with little. If you're not faithful with little, why would he give us more?
Right. And I think that, so when we look at, you know, this is getting a little personal, but it's all, like I said, we talk about everything. We are not where we should be for retirement. And again, our retirement guy, you know, is wagging his finger at us, and you guys need to be, we are not by any means where we should be. But again, we're good because we know the God who made tear ducts. We know the God who created us. Why am I going to worry about that stuff? Because we started so much later in life figuring out the budget. So, you know, a lot of our church is the young church, and so they have time on their side to
the compound effect is real, isn't it?
Absolutely. But so that's where I just trust God in this. I can do my part to budget, to make sure that we're not overspending, to talk to my partner, or if I, you know, a girlfriend or whatever, if I'm not married, and to have somebody that we can share that and make sure that we are not overspending. But I always think that, and I know this was true for me, that the more I had, the more it would satisfy something inside of me. But then you realize that it does just the opposite. Yes. When you get that thing that you've been wanting, it actually makes your whole...
It's like drinking salt water.
Yeah, yeah.
Thinking this will quench my thirst. It's only making it worse.
Yeah. Somebody had said years ago that you have a Jesus-sized void in your heart, and you're going to fill it with everything other than Jesus. And so we want to make sure that, you know, your heart is good and that you're filling it with the Jesus stuff. And then, you know, and give yourself a pause. Do I really need that? Is that going to make that big of a difference for me in 5 days? Or, you know, I joke about the Amazon thing, but that's super real for a lot, that Amazon is there every day and we just are filling our lives with stuff instead of people. I'd much rather spend time with people than the things that I think are going to make me happy. And I used to do that all the time. That's why I can make that statement.
I read a book that said the process of maturity says when you're younger, you think life is about things. That's why Christmas is so fun. Can't wait to get the go-kart or the whatever. Right. Then, and you see this with people in their 20s, you now go to like, oh no, life's about experiences. So then people itch to go on that vacation. You even see this through retirement. People are like, man, once I get that RV and see the world, then life will be good. But those who have gone through it enough and maybe heard from Jesus, our rabbi, and actually took him seriously, life's about people. Yeah. You know, that's ultimately, I just love even, you know, going to Christmas, Thanksgiving this week, hanging out with my grandma, because both my grandfathers have passed. But like, just like even looking at her posture, she's not looking at the things, or she's just enjoying the people in the room. You know, like that's wisdom that's been attained. Yeah. That's what it's all about. And we're just so busy trying to attain things and experiences, we miss out on the beauty of the people right in front of us.
100%.
Is there, and then we'll close. I want to leave room for any like last things in your mind. Like, oh, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. But are there like percentages that are helpful for budgeting? You know, like, okay, so we said tithe, 10%. Mm-hmm. Is there like another percentage for savings, and what should your percentage be for mortgage? Or is that really hard to say that there's a gold standard?
Yeah, we don't really have a gold standard. You know, and okay, your budget is fluid too. It's going to change month to month. So that was another thing to, you know, all these tips, you said 3, but I think I've given you like 6.
I love it.
But there isn't numbers. You know, we do, like when we tithe, that's just not even an issue. But there will be things that will come across our heart, and we'll go, I'll say, Mike, what do you think about this? And we'll talk about it. And like, we give to a dog sanctuary.
Nice.
I mean, you know, besides some of the other, you know, Christ-based places, we do that. And because we don't have a dog. So I told him, I said, we don't have a dog. Can we at least give, you know, somebody else who's taking care of the dogs? So, so there isn't a percentage that we per se do, but sometimes, I mean, it can be, you know, we try to pay down a little bit more on our mortgage. So, you know, we try to do that every month, and we try to put more into our 401k. We try to do all of those things that are, I think, really important. But first and foremost is just the tithe. I think that tithe and then give. And you will just see things turn around that you've never seen turn around. And again, looking back, I can't believe it's been 16 years that whole time has happened, and the progression. And when you look at those numbers, you go, man, that's pretty amazing. And it did get competitive with Mike and I when we were dating to see who would out tithe the other, because, you know, we're competitive people, because it was funny. But so no, I don't think that there's a specific percentage, but
I think it's even fascinating you say tithe and then give, because tithing is giving, but I think you're communicating tithe is such a go-to. It's not even like I don't know. It's not even like a sacrifice at this point, right? It's just a part of the budget. Then how do I give beyond that? But I mean, I'm here to tape, like, tithing is giving, but you're just using a different paradigm. That's just where your mind's at, which is great.
And there was a time where we decided, hey, here's how much we are tithing. Are we feeling it? And if we don't feel it, we give more, because we want to make sure that, and again, you can't outgive God, because it's his money, and it's so easy just to go. So that's really, so we do the 10%, but, and it's probably a little bit more than I'm sure it is more than the 10%, because we go, all right, and then we'll round up, and then above and beyond that we do. And yeah, it is all tithing, but we make sure that we are at least hard number. That is our 10%, our first fruits. And then again, when something comes up at the church, you guys need something, we're happy to, you know, do that, you know, to.
So you're saying you always give systematically, and then you look for moments of sacrificial giving,
right?
To use the paradigm we use from the generosity practice.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to, just like something burning in your heart, or a tip, or a thought? We've covered so much. I can't imagine. I'm just want to make sure I put that out there.
Well, I'm sure I'll think about it when I'm done.
On the drive home.
I should have said this, but you know, it's just a fun practice, and it was terrifying so many years ago, and how is it going to work? But it's just about trusting God. Do you trust God or not? And it just, that's it. Just trust God, trust and obey, and God is going to show you he's still God, and he's still in control, and he's still going to hold you in his hands.
Well, I just want to thank you, Grace. I just consider you you and Mike a pillar of our church, and I just appreciate your generosity. You're generous, obviously, as we've established, financially, but you're also generous, I think, just with honor. I think you honor the people in the room. I think you do a really good job of that. I think you're generous. You really help our church grow by even just welcoming people every single week. You're out there. You missed the first 2 songs sacrificially because you're making sure people feel loved. So I'm so grateful for that. You're generous in that you give, you allow Mike to be with us a lot as he builds and builds and builds. I'm so sad he won't be at the, you guys can't make it to our Dream Team Christmas party. I had a special like tool time award for him because of like everything we have he built. And this is my opportunity, and I'll say this when we interview Mike as well, but like everything you build for us, you guys never send us the receipts. So thank you. So to me, that's such a sacrificial gift. I mean, the type of stuff you guys build and give us is incredible. So you do so much behind the scenes, and I know you don't care about the credit, but I love to give people credit when I can. So just thank you. We immensely became better when you guys joined the family. So thank you so much.
Well, I'll share Mike with you guys, and it's funny that he will come up with something. He says, "I'm going to make this for the church," and I'm like, and I said, "Okay." And so there he is. And so I told him a couple of days ago, I said, in retirement, Passion Creek gets you most, don't they? I said, I can already see that. My honey-do list is going away, and your whatever,
I have one too. I don't know what we call that list.
Mikey-do list is gonna increase.
I love how many prototypes he has. That's what I love the most. He goes, "This is a prototype." I'm like, that sounds so cool.
But let me just say, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate the church and its transparency and who you are, and that it is just home to us. We have grown so much as Christians, as believers, as we don't want to be attenders. We want to be those disciples. We want to go out. You've challenged us in ways that we have never been challenged. And we've been Christians, but we really feel like that's why God has us here, is that he's challenging us to grow in our relationship with each other and with him. And that's attributed to you. I leave, and I didn't tell you how great your sermon was Sunday, but I leave there and I go, man, that was amazing. So thank you. Thank you for doing the hard work in your study. So there, back to you.
Yeah. You couldn't just take a compliment.
Nope, evidently not.
No, that's so great. Hey guys, comment. So we always do comment a word, because this shows that they came all the way to the end of the podcast. Can you think of a random word or phrase that they need to comment? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Can we say sea salt?
Sea salt. That's the perfect word.
Right.
Amazing. Comment sea salt down below. Seriously, thank you so much. And thank you guys for giving us an hour of your time. This is going to bless a lot of people. So thank you for your story, and thank you for you.